I came to this snow-covered land only to make money. But the first man I insulted turned out to be the one who saved my life again and again. He despised the Han. I looked down on mountain folk. We should have been nothing but strangers on the same journey, until the day I realized. If I lost him in this sea of snow, I might never want to go home again. Cold wind slapped my face the moment I stepped down from the last cart, still able to move on the rocky dirt road. The border post was nothing but a row of canvas tents and low wooden huts, kitchen smoke curling up into the gray afternoon sky. A cluster of pack horses stood nearby, thin and dust-caked, nothing like the sturdy Han horses I was used to. I frowned, pulling my fur coat tighter. Is this the kind of horse you people plan to use to haul cargo through the mountains? I asked the interpreter beside me, not bothering to hide my disdain. A few locals standing nearby glanced at me, their eyes cold, then turned away and went back to work as if I didn't exist. I scoffed, stepping over a patch of frozen mud, wondering just how much more I'd have to endure on this long journey ahead. The interpreter led me to a young man crouched down checking a mule's hoof. He straightened up at the sound of footsteps, taller than I expected, skin weathered by mountain wind, dark hair tied back loosely at the nape of his neck. His eyes studied me, not with suspicion, but as if weighing whether I was even worth the trouble. "This is Karma, the best guide in this region," the interpreter said. I extended my hand out of habit from years of trading, but Karma only glanced at it for a second before turning away, not shaking it. "Han," he said, low-voiced, not a question. I lowered my hand, my spine stiffening. "Wen Hao, and I pay fairly, I don't need gratitude." He said nothing, just turned and walked toward the mules, leaving me standing there with my hand still hanging awkwardly in the air. Inside the dim wooden hut, I laid the map out on the low table, tapping the sum I'd carefully calculated the whole way here. 30 taels of silver there and back, not a coin more. Karma sat across from me, arms crossed, not even glancing at the paper. 50. Crossing the Nyanshan Pass this season is no joke. 50 taels just to guide me. Do you take me for some foolish rich merchant? Then go alone. Karma stood, pulled back the hide covering the doorway, and walked out final as if he had no intention of negotiating further. I stood frozen for a second, then hurried after him, boots sinking into the thin snow. "Fine, 45, not one more coin." Karma stopped, turned to look me over from head to toe, then gave a slight nod, saying nothing more, as if the deal were already settled. That night, on my way back to my tent, I passed the horse pen and overheard voices coming from behind a stack of hay. Dorje, the burly man I'd seen standing with Karma that afternoon, was speaking sharply, pointing toward the tent I'd just left. A greedy Han, only good at calculating profit. "Have you forgotten what happened before?" Dorje said, his voice edged with warning. Karma stood still, shoulders tense, gaze fixed on the distant snow-capped ridges. "I'm only guiding him, nothing more." "Then make sure it stays that way." Dorje clapped Karma hard on the shoulder and walked off, leaving Karma alone in the dark, unaware I'd heard every word from behind the woodpile. The next morning, the caravan set off before the sun had even cleared the eastern ridge. The rough dirt road jolted me nonstop on horseback, my hands gripping the reins until my knuckles went white. Is this road always this terrible? I grumbled, looking at Karma riding ahead, his back straight as if he felt none of the jolting at all. No answer. I pressed on, my tone sharper. "And that smell, yak stench all over you, it's enough to choke me." Karma didn't turn his head, just reached back, pulled a sheepskin from his saddle and tossed it toward me without a word. I scrambled to catch it before it hit the ground, looked up ready to protest, but he'd already ridden further ahead, silent as the surrounding mountains. Night fell fast as the caravan stopped by a small stream. The campfire crackled among the circle of travelers, smoke mixing with the smell of damp, dry grass. Karma poured from a leather flask into a wooden bowl, thick, pale yellow liquid swirling inside, and handed it to me without a word. I sniffed it and grimaced. "What is this? Smells like old mutton fat." "Butter tea, drink it, it'll be cold tonight." I took a reluctant sip, rich, salty, strange, but not as bad as I'd expected. I said nothing more, just quietly drank the whole bowl, warmth spreading pleasantly through my stomach. When I looked up, I caught the corner of Karma's mouth curve up, just for a moment, before he turned away as if nothing had happened. The next morning, as we rounded a bend between two cliffs, another caravan appeared from the opposite direction, unfamiliar banners fluttering in the wind. The man leading it, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, rode closer with a warm, easy smile. "Greetings, fellow travelers. I'm Lobsang, also trading tea toward Lhasa." His gaze swept over the crates loaded on my mules, lingering a beat too long on the most carefully bound sacks. I nodded politely, but caught Karma out of the corner of my eye, reining his horse in to block the path, keeping the distance between the two caravans from closing further. Lobsang gave a thin smile, exchanged a few more pleasantries, then signaled his group to move on, but his eyes, just before turning away, lingered a moment too long on my cargo. That evening, when both caravans camped at the same rest stop, Lobsang sought out Karma, who was busy tying down the horse reins, his voice falsely warm. "I hear you're the best guide in these parts. That shortcut through the Western Valley, does it really save 2 days?" Karma didn't look up, his hands still deftly knotting rope. "I don't know any road except the one I take. Come now, surely a local like you knows every shortcut there is." Lobsang smiled, stepping closer. Karma straightened, looked him dead in the eye, his voice icy. "The road I guide, only my caravan travels." He turned and walked straight back toward the tent, leaving Lobsang standing there, the smile gone from his face. The road on the third day cut across a narrow ridge, sheer cliff on one side, a fog-shrouded ravine plunging away on the other. My horse suddenly reared in panic when a boulder tumbled down from above, its front hoof slipping on the icy stone. I felt my whole body lurch sideways, the reins slipping from my hands in a flash of panic. "Karma!" A hand seized my wrist at that instant, yanking me hard back toward the safety of the rock face. Karma had already pulled his horse alongside, his expression tense in a way I'd never seen. "Careful." The shout came out sharp, harsh, nothing like his usual quiet composure. I gasped for breath, heart pounding, only managing a nod, my throat too tight to force out a word of thanks. My ankle twisted badly as I tried to dismount at the next rocky slope, pain shooting up so hard I nearly buckled. Karma looked at my swollen ankle, said nothing, just turned his back to me and gestured. "I can walk," I said, trying to step forward, but every movement made me wince. "The road ahead is even more slippery." Karma didn't wait for my agreement. He bent down and hoisted me onto his back in one decisive motion. I stiffened, my hands fumbling, not knowing where to place them, finally settling loosely around his shoulders. Warmth radiated from Karma's back through the thick layers of his coat, his footing steady as he crossed one slick stone slab after another. Neither of us said a word the whole way, only the sound of mountain wind whistling past my ears, and my heart beating faster than usual for reasons I didn't dare admit. Inside the tent, candlelight flickered with every gust slipping through the seams of the canvas. Karma knelt beside me, holding a handful of crushed dried herbs mixed with a thick brown oil, its sharp scent filling my nose. "This will sting a little," he said, and before I could react, he'd already pressed the mixture onto my swollen ankle. I sucked in a breath as the sting spread quickly, followed soon after by a soothing warmth. Karma bent his head in concentration, wrapping strip after strip of cloth around the injury, his weather-roughened fingers moving slowly and carefully across my skin. There was a moment his hand lingered on my ankle longer than necessary, and when he looked up, our eyes met at a distance closer than I'd expected. Karma was the one who looked away first, bending back down to tie off the final knot. That night, some distance from our camp, Lobsang stood in the shadow of a low grove, signaling to a subordinate crouched low, creeping toward the tent where our cargo was stored. "Just get that merchant's route map. Find out which pass he plans to cross with the most valuable goods." Lobsang whispered, his eyes never leaving the quiet camp. The man nodded, bent low, and slipped into the shadows, his footsteps nearly silent on the thin layer of snow. Lobsang watched him go, the corner of his mouth curling into a cold smile, his fingers tightening around the riding crop in his hand. An unusual rustling sound jolted Karma awake from his uneasy sleep, his hand reaching by reflex for the dagger at his hip. He slipped out of the tent, eyes scanning quickly across the cargo area, a dark figure crouched over a pile of bundled goods. "Stop right there," Karma shouted, lunging forward. The figure startled and bolted, crashing into a stack of wooden crates that toppled over with a loud clatter, the noise waking the whole camp. I rushed out of my tent to find Karma standing there, breathing hard beside the scattered cargo, a torn scrap of cloth clutched in his hand, the only trace the thief had left behind. "Almost lost the route map," Karma said, his voice still tense, eyes fixed on the darkness where the figure had vanished. The next morning, as everyone broke camp, I found Karma checking the straps on the horses. I stood there a moment, unsure how to begin, my hand unconsciously gripping the hem of my coat. "Last night," I said, my voice missing its usual arrogance. "If it weren't for you, I'd have lost the entire shipment." Karma looked up at me, said nothing, just waited for me to continue. "Thank you," I said, meaning it this time, not the empty courtesy I usually tossed around. I'm not used to saying that to anyone. The corner of Karma's mouth softened, a fleeting, almost gentle expression crossing his usually cold face. "No need to thank me. It was my duty." But the way he looked at me in that moment held something more than duty. The clear sky turned dark in the blink of an eye, wind howling through the mountain gaps, sweeping in thick waves of snow like a white curtain blotting out everything. The whole caravan scattered in panic, voices calling out to each other, swallowed by the roaring wind. "Storm's coming." "Find shelter now," Karma shouted, trying to rally everyone, but the snow fell so thick no one could see more than a few steps ahead. I clutched my horse's reins, trying to follow the shape of the person ahead of me, but a sudden gust knocked me sideways, sending me stumbling into the snow. When I lifted my head, all I saw was blinding white in every direction, the voices of the caravan fading fast, then vanishing entirely. "Karma," I screamed into the void, my voice swallowed almost instantly by the wind. Snow lashed my face as I stumbled forward through the dense white haze, no longer able to feel my hands or feet. A figure suddenly appeared right in front of me, gripping my arm and pulling me along. "Follow me, don't let go," Karma shouted over the wind, his voice hoarse from the cold. We followed the rock face, Karma's hand feeling along each jutting stone until a dark opening appeared between two massive boulders, a narrow cave, just wide enough for the two of us. Karma pushed me in first, then crawled in after, pulling a hide over the entrance to block out the worst of the wind. Inside it was pitch dark, nothing but the sound of our ragged breathing echoing against the freezing stone. Karma dug through his bag for flint and tinder, hands trembling from the cold as he tried to strike a spark, but the firewood he'd hastily gathered outside was soaked through with snow. A spark flared, then died out again and again. Not working. Karma muttered through gritted teeth, trying once more, but the thin wisp of smoke faded just as quickly. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the cold seep deeper through each layer of clothing, my teeth starting to chatter. "If we can't get a fire going." I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence, staring out at the blizzard still raging beyond the cave mouth. Karma tossed the useless wood aside and turned to look at me, his eyes carrying a rare, grave intensity in the dim light. "Without fire, we'll have to stay warm another way. Take off the wet layers." Waiting for the storm to pass, Karma sat leaning against the rock wall, eyes fixed on the gap where snow still swept sideways. "Hear the wind?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. I listened, hearing nothing but an endless, shapeless howl. "All I hear is it screaming. No, it's weakening." "Each gust further apart now," Karma pointed toward the crack in the rock. "And there, the clouds are thinning near the horizon. Mountain storms rarely last more than a couple of hours." I stayed quiet, for once not interrupting or calculating anything, just watching closely where his hand pointed, trying to make out signs I'd never once bothered to notice in my entire life. Something in the calm of his voice eased the fear inside me. Night fell, the temperature inside the cave dropping further, my breath forming pale clouds in front of my face. Karma said nothing, just pulled the last remaining hide blanket over both of us, then sat closer beside me. "Come here," he said, his voice rough, wrapping an arm around me and pulling me against his chest. I stiffened for a moment, but the bone-deep cold forced me to give in, leaning fully into the warmth of his body. His heartbeat thudded steady against my ear, his breath warm against the top of my head. Neither of us said another word, just the wind howling outside and a fragile warmth passing between two bodies pressed close together in the freezing dark. In the middle of the night, the cold began to blur my mind, consciousness slipping between waking and sleep. I mumbled broken words, my voice weak and trembling in the warmth of Karma's arms. "Don't go, don't leave me alone again," I whispered, no longer in control of what I was saying. "Father said, if I fail again, don't bother coming home." Karma stayed silent, tightening his arms around me, not interrupting, just quietly listening to each fragmented, unconscious word. In the dark, his face carried something sorrowful, his hand gently stroking my back as if soothing a child caught in a nightmare, even though he had no idea what wounds had given rise to those delirious words. Light filtering through the cave opening woke me, and I realized I was still curled in Karma's arms, head resting against his chest. We both jolted awake almost at the same moment, quickly pulling apart, shifting to opposite sides of the cramped space. Storms passed. Karma said first, eyes fixed on the cave mouth, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah," I answered curtly, my hand unconsciously smoothing my coat, my cheeks burning despite the still frigid air. We packed our things in silence, our eyes occasionally meeting by accident before quickly darting away. But something had changed, no longer the wary, measuring look from our first meeting, but an unfamiliar warmth neither of us was quite ready to name. Leaving the cave, we followed the old tracks back toward the caravan. Suddenly, a low growl rose from the thick brush ahead. Two gray mountain wolves emerged, their yellow eyes gleaming with menace. "Stay still, don't run," Karma said quietly, slowly drawing the dagger at his hip. The larger wolf lunged without warning. Karma shoved me behind him, swinging the blade in defense. Sharp claws raked across his arm, blood blooming instantly through the leather sleeve. Karma gritted his teeth through the pain, continuing to fend them off until both wolves finally backed away, tails low, their snarls fading into the trees. "You're hurt?" I rushed toward him the moment the danger passed, my hands trembling at the sight of the deep gash bleeding on his arm. "It's nothing, just a scratch," Karma said, his voice steady but his face paling from the pain. I didn't listen, tearing a strip from my own inner shirt, my hands clumsy but determined as I wrapped it tightly around the wound. "Don't say it's nothing, look how much blood there is." I bit my lip, tying the knot as tight as I could, my chest tightening with a worry deeper than any I'd ever felt for anyone else. Karma watched me closely as I bent over him, bandaging, his eyes carrying a mix of surprise and something warmer, as if no one had ever worried over him enough to forget themselves like this. We found the caravan late in the afternoon, everyone in chaos cleaning up after the storm. I rushed to check my cargo, my heart lurching when I saw several bundles torn open, the knots no longer matching the ones I'd tied. I opened one to inspect it, my face draining of color. "This isn't the tea I brought, this is inferior stock," the caravan manager stammered that another group had passed through during the chaos of the storm. Karma stood beside me, jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with sudden alertness. "Lobsang," he said, his voice cold as ice. I found Lobsang's caravan camped not far off, storming straight up to him, my voice sharp with fury. "Give my goods back now?" Lobsang raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play innocent. My tea was swapped during the storm and your caravan was the only one that passed through." I stepped closer, fist clenching to grab his collar. Karma moved quickly between us, one hand pressing against my chest to hold me back, eyes locked on Lobsang in open warning. "That's enough. This will be settled properly, not with fists in the middle of the road." Lobsang smirked faintly, though a flicker of wariness crossed his eyes at the rare, grim intensity on Karma's face. That evening when the caravan made camp, Dorje strode straight up to Karma, who was checking the horses, his voice sharp from the first word. "Where were you during the storm? The whole caravan was searching for you, and you were off tending to that hand merchant." Karma didn't look up, hands still busy with his work. "We got separated in the storm, it wasn't intentional." "Have you forgotten a guide's duty is to protect the whole group, not just one person?" Dorje lowered his voice, but it still carried plenty of frustration, his eyes flicking toward where I stood not far away. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment, Karma. I don't like it." Karma stopped, turned to face Dorje directly, silent for a long moment before answering, his voice firmer than usual. "I know what I'm doing." I turned to leave, meaning to give them privacy, but Dorje's next words stopped me cold behind a large boulder, and I didn't dare make a sound. "Have you forgotten about Lin Feng?" Dorje said, lowering his voice but still clear enough for me to hear. "Another hand merchant, just as sweet-talking, who earned your trust the same way. The result was the whole village nearly wiped out when he led bandits straight to it." I stood frozen behind the rock, my heart pounding. Karma didn't respond, only the sound of his heavy footsteps walking away, leaving a suffocating silence behind in the dark. I swallowed hard, the pieces of Karma's initial coldness slowly falling into place in my mind. That night, I found Karma sitting alone by the dying fire, hesitating a moment before sitting down across from him. I overheard what Dorje said about someone named Lin Feng. Karma's hand tightened around the stick he was holding, the firelight reflecting a distant look in his eyes. A long moment passed before he finally spoke, his voice unusually low. I was young then, trusted him like a brother. He asked in detail about the way into the village, said it was to bring trade goods in more safely. Karma paused, jaw tightening. But he led a band of raiders in on the very night of the village festival, when no one was on guard. Many died, including... He didn't finish, just shook his head. I stayed quiet, my chest heavy at the pain hidden beneath eyes that were always so cold. "So that's why you don't trust the Han, don't trust me." "At first, yes," Karma admitted without flinching. "And now?" I asked softly, not entirely sure I wanted to hear the answer. Karma turned to look at me, the firelight casting sharp and fragile lines across his face at once. "Now, I don't know anymore." It wasn't the reassurance I'd hoped for, but something fierce rose up in me anyway, a determination to prove I was nothing like the man who had betrayed him, no matter how long it took. 2 days later, the caravan stopped at a small rest station run by an old man named Yeshe. When I stepped in to ask for more water, the old man studied me closely, then gave a small, knowing smile. "You're the one traveling with Karma, aren't you?" Old Yeshe poured me tea, his voice slow and measured. "Ever since that raid on the village, the boy's kept to himself, doesn't trust anyone but these mountains anymore." I gripped my cup, listening in silence. "He still guides people, but only out of duty now, never really letting anyone in." Old Yeshe continued, his aged eyes drifting toward Karma standing watch over the horses in the distance. "This is the first time in years I've seen him look at a Han without suspicion in his eyes." That night, after leaving old Yeshe's station, Karma and I sat side by the campfire, the flickering light casting our shadows across the canvas tent wall. I turned the bowl of butter tea in my hands, hesitating a moment before speaking first, wanting to match the honesty Karma had shown me these past few days. "Do you know why I risked coming all the way up here to trade? It's not because I'm brave or wealthy." I stared into the flames, my voice dropping. 3 years ago, I trusted a longtime business partner, gave him my family's entire fortune to expand our trade south. He vanished with all of it, left me buried in debt and my whole family looking at me with contempt. Karma turned to look at me, not interrupting, simply waiting for me to continue. "Since then, I swore I'd never trust anyone again, only numbers, only clear contracts." I laughed softly, a bitter sound. "This trip is my last chance to start over, to prove to my father I'm not useless." Karma stayed silent for a long moment, then gave a slow nod, his eyes carrying a depth of understanding I'd never seen from him before. We're not so different, you and I." We both looked into the fire, no need for more words, but the invisible distance between two wounded souls seemed to have narrowed considerably. Late that night, once the whole camp had drifted into exhausted sleep, two figures crept quietly around the caravan's food stores. They were Lobsang's men, sent to take revenge for the public confrontation days earlier. "Hurry, pour the water into the barley sacks, then slash open the flour bags," one whispered, eyes darting warily around. The other worked quickly, water soaking into the precious grain reserves, flour scattering into the mud. Within minutes, most of the food supplies meant for the rest of the journey were ruined completely. The two figures slipped back into the shadows, leaving behind a scene of wreckage no one in the camp would discover until morning. Panicked shouting woke me early the next morning. I rushed outside to find the whole caravan gathered around the food tent, faces pale with alarm. Soaked sacks of barley, flour scattered everywhere, mixed into the mud. Nearly all our food reserves are ruined. The caravan manager shouted, his voice edged with panic. "We're still half the journey from the next station. How will we survive?" The camp broke into anxious murmurs. I found Karma already standing at the center of the crowd, his face grim as he tried to calm everyone down. I stepped up beside him, and for a moment our eyes met, both understanding this called for immediate action, not panic. "Ration what's left into small portions, enough to last 3 days, Karma announced, his voice carrying clearly across the camp. "I'll go hunt for more." "Wen Hao, calculate what remains and divide it fairly among everyone." I nodded at once, feeling for the first time that I was truly part of this group, not just a merchant being escorted along. That afternoon, Karma prepared his hunting gear, bow and dagger arranged neatly at his side. I approached, pulling on a thicker coat, my eyes resolute. "I'm coming with you," I announced, not a question. Karma frowned, shaking his head immediately. "No. Hunting in the high mountains is dangerous. You don't know the terrain. You'll only slow me down." "I don't care about the danger. This caravan is my responsibility. I can't just sit and wait while you face it alone." I crossed my arms, my gaze unwavering. Karma studied me for a long moment, seeming to weigh reason against some feeling he wasn't ready to admit. Finally, he sighed, tossing me a small bow. "Fine, but do exactly as I say, no acting on your own." I nodded firmly, an odd sense of joy rising in me that Karma had agreed to let me stay by his side through the danger ahead. The two of us followed animal tracks higher up the mountain, the thinning air leaving me breathless. Karma led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the brush for signs of prey. But as we crossed an ice-covered outcrop to reach a herd of mountain goats in the distance, the ice beneath my feet suddenly cracked. "Careful!" Karma shouted, but it was too late. I slipped, my whole body dangling over the edge of the ice cliff, clinging to nothing but a small rock ledge. "Don't let go!" Karma lunged forward, lying flat on the ice to spread his weight, reaching down to grip my wrist. "Look at me, don't look down." I trembled, forcing myself to meet his eyes, steadying myself against the calm certainty in his voice. "Slowly bring your right foot up, find a foothold to the right, just under that jutting rock." I followed each instruction, feeling a strange, seamless coordination between us in that life-or-death moment. Finally, with one last hard pull from Karma, I rolled safely back onto the flat ice, both of us lying there gasping, hearts racing not only from the narrow escape. Having caught 2 mountain goats, we set up a temporary camp for the night before heading back to the caravan the next morning. A small fire crackled between us, warm orange light dancing across Karma's face as he bent over, roasting meat for the group's supplies. I sat across from him, still riding the aftershock of that afternoon's brush with death. Without thinking too much, I reached across the fire, gently placing my hand over his as he held the roasting stick. He froze, looking up at me, his eyes wide with surprise and something deeper beneath it. I didn't pull my hand away, just held his gaze, my fingers curling gently around his calloused hand. Neither of us said a word, just the crackle of the fire and our eyes meeting in a long, silent stretch that made words feel unnecessary. Karma was the one who broke the moment, suddenly pulling his hand back, standing to turn away from me. "It's late, we should rest so we can head back early," he said, his voice flat and empty, nothing like the look in his eyes moments before. I stared after his rigid back, stunned. "Karma." "I'm going to check the traps around camp." He didn't turn around, walking quickly into the darkness, leaving me alone by the fire, my hands still warm from where his had been. Away from the firelight, Karma stopped, leaning against a tree trunk, his breath uneven for reasons that had nothing to do with exhaustion. He clenched the hand I'd held, memories of Lin Feng and everything he'd lost flooding back, warning him not to let history repeat itself. The next morning, Karma returned to his cold, distant self, almost exactly the man from our first days together. He gave curt orders to break camp, never once meeting my eyes the entire morning. Something tightened in my chest, and I tried to make conversation a few times, only to receive clipped, dismissive answers. "We need to move faster to reach the caravan before dark," Karma said, purely businesslike, as if last night had never happened. My heart sank, a bitter feeling of rejection and confusion rising up inside me. Maybe I'd misread the signs, maybe for Karma it had only been a moment of weakness. I clenched my jaw, rebuilding my familiar wall of defense, my voice turning distant and haughty again, just like those first days. "Fine, we'll do it your way." For the rest of the journey back to the caravan, neither of us said another word beyond what was strictly necessary. Back at the caravan, Lobsang seemed to have been waiting for exactly this opportunity, appearing the moment he saw me step away from Karma to check the cargo. He approached, his voice warm in a way that contrasted sharply with his earlier suspicion. "Wen Hao, my friend, I hear you had quite the ordeal up in the mountains." Lobsang smiled, studying the weary, troubled look on my face. "I have some good business connections in Lhasa. If you're interested, we could work together directly, put our earlier misunderstanding behind us." I frowned, still wary, but my unsettled state of mind had dulled my usual sharpness. "I'm not sure." "Your guide," Lobsang cut in, his voice deliberately lowered with insinuation. "He's just a nomad, doesn't understand serious business. You should find a partner more suited to your ambitions." He clapped my shoulder lightly, his smile calculating, deliberately lingering to chat where the whole caravan could easily see. From a distance, Karma was tying down cargo onto a horse's back, his gaze drifting over and settling on where I stood chatting with Lobsang. The man laughed, spoke warmly, even patted my shoulder with easy familiarity, and I showed no sign of discomfort or distance. Karma's hand tightened around the leather strap he was tying, his knuckles going white. He turned away at once, unwilling to watch any longer, but the image of Lobsang standing close to me lingered in his mind, stirring an unfamiliar feeling more intense than anything he'd known before. Not the usual wariness reserved for a business rival, but a quiet, gnawing jealousy that tightened uncomfortably in his chest. Dorje, standing nearby, noticed the shift in Karma's expression, brow furrowing as he watched. But Karma had already turned and walked away before his sworn brother could ask, burying the tangled feeling deep inside, the way he'd learned to do for years. That night, when the caravan camped near a small rest station, Dorje came to Karma's tent, his face unusually grave. "The next station is where the road splits toward home. I think it's time you stopped here. Let someone else guide that hand caravan the rest of the way." Karma was cleaning his dagger, his hand pausing for a moment. "The guiding contract isn't finished, there's still half the journey to Lhasa." "I'm not talking about the contract." Dorje sat down across from him, his voice low but heavy with pressure. "I see how you look at him, Karma. Don't let history repeat itself. Our people have already lost too much to one hand. I don't want to lose you too." Karma stayed silent for a long while, staring down at the blade gleaming in the firelight. "I know what I'm doing." He repeated the old line, but this time his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Then prove it to me." Dorje stood, his gaze resolute. "At the next station, you come back with me. Let someone else finish the rest of the road." That night, Karma couldn't sleep, sitting alone outside his tent, staring up at the star-filled sky. Dorje's words kept echoing in his mind, tangled together with the image of Wen Hao laughing with Lobsang that afternoon, and then the memory of a warm hand holding his by the fire days before. He remembered his vow to his people after the tragedy years ago, never again to let his heart soften for any hand, to treat the work of guiding as duty alone, with no room for feeling. But then came the memory of Wen Hao trembling, murmuring in his sleep during the blizzard, the sincerity in his eyes when he'd said thank you, the frantic worry as he bandaged Karma's wound. All these memories piled on top of one another, slowly tearing down the wall of defense he'd built over so many years. What am I doing? Karma whispered to himself, hands pressed to his head, feeling for the first time utterly powerless against his own emotions, unsure whether to follow the reason forged by pain, or the heart slowly waking after years of dormancy. The next morning, the whole camp erupted in chaos when one of Lobsang's men rushed to the caravan leader, pointing toward my tent, his voice full of false outrage. I saw the Han merchant with my own eyes, rifling through the sacred tent last night, hiding something in his belongings. People gathered, murmuring, and Lobsang appeared right after, his expression grave with calculated intent, holding up an old leather map bearing the sacred markings of the tribe, the very one his man had secretly planted in my belongings the night before while everyone slept. The sacred map showing the way to the tribe's holy site has vanished from the elder's tent, Lobsang announced loudly before the gathered crowd, his eyes flicking toward Karma with pointed implication. I'm afraid we need to search this merchant's belongings. News spread like wildfire, and within moments Karma stood before my tent, his face carrying a fury I'd never seen before. Hand over the map, he said, his voice cold as ice, nothing like the man who'd held me through the blizzard. I didn't take any map. I stared at him, stunned by his tone, a feeling of betrayal rising in my throat. You actually believe I'd do that? Lobsang's man saw you with his own eyes. Karma snapped, stepping forward to search my belongings despite my protests, and then the old leather map fell out from the bottom of my bag, something I'd never laid eyes on before. This is a setup, Lobsang planted it there. I shouted, but Karma had already straightened, gripping the map tight, his eyes full of a tangled mix of disappointment and hurt. I trusted you, Karma said, his voice shaking with anger and pain. I let myself trust again, and the result was exactly the same as before. You never truly trusted me at all. You were just waiting for an excuse to prove yourself right about doubting me from the start. I couldn't hold back either, my voice rising with fury and hurt, the two of us standing face to face, a distance between us wider than it had ever been since that night in the cave. Fine, I laughed bitterly, a smile more painful than any I'd ever worn, the ache of being doubted by someone I'd only just begun to trust cutting deep. If you think I'm capable of that, then I don't need you to guide me anymore. Karma faltered, but I'd already turned to gather my things, hands shaking with anger and hurt tangled together. I'll find my own way to Lhasa, even if it means crossing 100 mountains alone. You can't go alone through there, it's too dangerous. Karma stepped forward to stop me, but I sidestepped him, unwilling to look into eyes that had doubted me only minutes before. I've taken care of myself long enough before I ever met you. I threw my pack over my shoulder, my gaze resolute even as my heart shattered inside. I don't need a guide who doesn't trust me. I walked straight out of camp, leaving Karma standing there with the map still in his hand, and a creeping regret beginning to settle into his chest as he watched my figure disappear toward the white peaks of the snow mountains. I walked on, consumed by anger and hurt, no longer paying attention to the warning signs Karma had once taught me to read on the road. The wind grew stronger, dark clouds gathering fast, but I kept my head down, wanting nothing more than to get far from the place that had just broken my heart. The trail led across a thin sheet of ice bridging a mountain crevasse, and I stepped onto it without checking its strength the way Karma had always carefully instructed. A dry crack split the air beneath my feet, and before I could react, the ice gave way, my whole body dropping into the dark chasm below. I slammed against the icy walls several times before landing on a narrow rock ledge more than 20 feet below the surface, pain shooting through my body, one leg giving off the sickening crack of broken bone. I tried to call for help, but my voice came out as nothing more than a weak groan, darkness and cold slowly closing in over my fading consciousness. Back at the rest station, Karma sat numbly by the dying fire, the map still clutched in his hand, his mind churning with regret. Old Yeshe approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, his aged eyes full of concern. "I just spoke with one of Lobsang's servants," Old Yeshe said slowly, his voice grave. "He'd had too much to drink and let it slip. It was Lobsang who ordered the map planted in that merchant's belongings, just to drive the two of you apart." Karma shot to his feet, gripping the map so tightly his knuckles turned white. Why didn't I think of that from the start? He closed his eyes, the image of Wen Hao's wounded expression as he walked away replaying endlessly in his mind, alongside the blind fury that had driven away the very person he'd come to trust. "What are you still standing here for?" Old Yeshe urged. "A big storm is coming, that boy is out there alone, he'll be in danger." Karma didn't hesitate a second longer, quickly gathering rope, a torch, and a few essential rescue supplies, mounting his horse just as the first flakes of a new storm began to fall. Dorje ran out to block his path, his face etched with worry. "A big storm is coming, you can't go searching alone in these conditions, it's too dangerous." "I don't care about the danger," Karma said, his voice hard, a resolve in his eyes unlike anything Dorje had ever seen. "I was wrong to doubt him. I can't let him face danger alone out there because of my mistake." "Karma," Dorje tried to grab the reins, but Karma had already spurred his horse straight into the thickening white curtain of snow, leaving his sworn brother's calls behind him. The wind howled fiercer with every passing moment, but in Karma's mind there was only one thought driving him forward: he had to find Wen Hao, whatever it took. After hours of searching through the blinding blizzard, Karma finally spotted the fractured ice near the mountain crevasse, his heart clenching as he looked down into the deep darkness below. "Wen Hao," he shouted, his voice carrying over the roaring wind. A weak groan answered from somewhere deep in the crevasse. Karma didn't hesitate, tying the rope tightly around a large boulder, wrapping the other end around himself before beginning to lower himself down the sheer ice wall, heedless of the danger to his own life. Reaching the ledge where I lay curled up, my face pale from cold and blood loss, Karma dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he examined the injury on my leg. I'm here," he repeated over and over, his voice breaking with emotion, quickly securing me to himself with the remaining rope before signaling for those above to pull us both up. Once we were both hauled up to the safety of the ledge, I had lost consciousness completely, my face drained of color, lips tinged blue from the cold. Karma laid me down, both hands pressing against my chest, feeling for the faint but still present beat of my heart. Wen Hao, wake up." Karma screamed into the raging storm around us, his voice breaking with panic and desperation, all trace of his usual calm composure gone. He pulled me tight against him, bending his head close to my ear, tears mixing with the melting snow on his face. "Don't leave me." Karma whispered, his voice cracking, letting his true feelings show completely for the first time, no longer hidden or guarded. "I'm sorry I doubted you, please wake up, I can't lose another person who matters to me." Amid the raging blizzard, Karma's desperate cry echoed off the high mountain walls, carrying with it all the feeling he'd kept buried for far too long. Dim light filtered through the tent, waking me, my whole body aching, my left leg splinted and rigidly bound. I shifted slightly, and the small sound was enough to jolt the figure slumped beside the bed instantly upright. "You're awake." Karma leaned in close, his face haggard from lack of sleep, dark circles beneath his red-rimmed eyes as if he hadn't slept in days. His hand trembled as it touched my forehead to check my temperature, clumsy in a way that contrasted sharply with his usual composure. "How long have you been here?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. 3 days, Karma answered, his hand still resting on me as if letting go might make me disappear again. "I haven't left, not once." His eyes were filled with a relief so deep it was tinged with guilt, and something warm tightened in my chest, hard to name. Karma pulled his chair closer to the bed, hands clasped tightly together, head bowed like a man awaiting judgment. I was wrong. Lobsang orchestrated everything. He had his men plant the map in your belongings just to drive us apart. I listened in silence, not interrupting, though the ache of being doubted still lingered from days before. I let fear from my past cloud my judgment, treated you unfairly, Karma continued, his voice breaking with a rare, genuine emotion. I'm sorry I doubted you, sorry I drove you to leave alone into danger. If anything had happened to you, I would never have forgiven myself. He looked up at me, his eyes carrying complete, unguarded sincerity. I know an apology isn't enough to make up for it, but I wanted you to know the truth, whether or not you can still forgive me. I studied Karma for a long moment, feeling the deep sincerity in every word, the anger inside me slowly dissolving, replaced by a warmth spreading through my whole body. I forgive you, I said softly, reaching out to take his tightly clasped hand. I was too proud and reckless too, running off alone like that. Karma tightened his grip on my hand, not letting go, his eyes carrying a silent question he hadn't yet found the courage to voice. Karma. I spoke first, deciding not to hide my true feelings any longer, willing to risk being hurt again if it came to that. Since that night in the cave, I've known I have feelings for you, more than I've ever let myself feel for anyone. Karma's head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise, then slowly softening into a tenderness I'd never seen before. Me too, he whispered, leaning in closer, his forehead gently touching mine. I tried to deny this feeling out of fear, but when I saw you fall into that crevasse, I realized nothing frightened me more than losing you. A few days later, once I'd recovered enough, Dorje gathered the entire caravan along with Lobsang's group in the open space at the center of the camp, holding the drunken confession of Lobsang's servant as evidence. Lobsang, do you have any explanation for having your man plant the sacred map in this merchant's belongings? Lobsang paled for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. This is baseless slander. That's enough. Dorje gestured, and the trembling servant was brought forward, confessing the whole truth before the gathered crowd's furious stares. The clear evidence left Lobsang with no room to deny it, his face turning ashen as he realized the scheme had been fully exposed. Anyone who schemes to harm another out of greed has no place on this Tea-Horse Road, Dorje declared firmly before the assembled caravan. Lobsang, you and your group are banished immediately, forbidden from traveling this route alongside any caravan from this day forward. Lobsang glared around at the crowd, but no one spoke in his defense, and he was forced to lead his group away under the contempt of everyone watching. After Lobsang's departure, Dorje found me resting in the shade of a tree, his expression somewhat sheepish, a stark contrast to his earlier wariness. He sat down across from me, silent for a moment before speaking. I was wrong to lump you together with Lin Feng. Dorje said, his voice unusually sincere. Throughout this journey, I've seen how you worried over Karma, how you were willing to risk yourself even after being treated unfairly. That's not the behavior of someone who only cares about profit. I smiled softly, touched by the honesty of someone who'd always kept me at arm's length. I understand your caution. If I'd lived through what your people did, I'd find it hard to trust a stranger too. Karma has carried that pain alone for far too long. Dorje said, gazing toward where Karma was busy preparing supplies nearby, his eyes full of the concern of an older brother for someone he loved. I hope you'll treat him well, don't let him be hurt again. I promise. I answered, meeting Dorje's gaze steadily, the vow coming from the deepest, most sincere part of me. On the last night before the caravan reached Lhasa, we made camp on a wide highland plateau, the night sky clear and glittering with stars like a silver ribbon stretched across the darkness. Karma led me away from the camp to a flat outcrop with an unobstructed view of the sky, free from the shadow of any mountain. This is where I usually come to think, Karma said, sitting down beside me, shoulder brushing mine in the cold highland air. The sky up here is almost never blocked, every star visible clear as day. I looked up, awestruck by a sight I'd rarely witnessed amid the crowded, smoke-filled capital. It's beautiful," I whispered, then turned to look at Karma, starlight reflected in his eyes making them shine gentler than I'd ever seen. Karma took my hand, no trace of hesitation or fear left in him this time. "Wen Hao, I want you to know clearly, no more uncertainty." He turned to look me straight in the eye, his voice steady and sincere. "I love you, not because circumstance pushed us together, but because it's a choice I realized long ago." My heart raced and I squeezed his hand, a smile spreading across my face without restraint. "I love you too, Karma. From the moment you held me in that cave, I knew my heart belonged here, belonged to you." We leaned our heads together beneath the star-filled sky, no more words needed, just a warm stillness settling over us both. The city of Lhasa rose grand against the valley, the golden roofs of its palaces gleaming beneath the sun, temple bells ringing out across the sacred air. My caravan entered the city, the lively market at its heart welcoming us with countless colors and sounds. The trading of tea, cloth, and salt went more smoothly than I'd ever hoped, local merchants praising the quality of the goods I'd brought, many eager to establish long-term partnerships. Word of how I'd survived the perils of the Tea-Horse Road, along with the story of exposing Lobsang's scheme, had spread throughout the merchant community, restoring my reputation and carrying it further than ever before. Standing in the bustling market, looking at profits far exceeding my initial hopes, I realized what made me happiest wasn't the glittering silver in my hands, but the proud look in Karma's eyes as he stood beside me, quietly watching me achieve the fresh start I'd once only dreamed of. That evening, once all the trading was done, I found Karma standing alone on the inn's terrace, looking down at the shimmering lights of Lhasa at night. I walked over to stand beside him, my heart full of hesitation over what I was about to say. "Karma, I have a proposal." I began, my voice trembling slightly with nerves. "For future trading trips, I want you to come with me, not because I need a guide anymore." Karma turned to look at me, waiting for me to continue. "But because I don't want to be apart from you," I said plainly, my gaze steady on him. "Wherever the trade takes me, I want you by my side, not as someone I've hired, but as..." I hesitated a moment, then decided to speak from the heart, as the partner I want to walk the rest of this life with. Karma stayed silent, his eyes carrying a complex emotion hard to name, both moved and deeply thoughtful at the weight of the offer. Karma turned and stepped a little further away, leaning against the terrace railing, his eyes fixed on the distant snow peaks of his homeland. "My whole life has been tied to these mountains," he said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "This is where I was born, where I found peace after everything I lost." I stood quietly, not daring to speak, giving him the time he needed to weigh such an important decision. "But these mountains have also just been where I hid after losing everything." Karma continued, turning back to look at me, his eyes growing steadily more resolute. "And now, I don't want to hide anymore. I want to truly live instead of just existing among these lonely peaks." He stepped closer, taking both my hands in his eyes brimming with determination. "I choose to follow you, Wen Hao. Not as someone leaving his homeland behind, but because I believe my heart has found a new home right here with you." Tears welled up in my eyes from sheer happiness, and I pulled Karma into a tight embrace, both of us holding each other close beneath the shimmering lights of Lhasa at night. Months later, on the way back from another trading trip, we stopped to rest for the night at the very spot where our first tent had once stood, beneath the same towering snow mountains. The campfire crackled, golden light dancing across two faces now familiar and bonded through everything they'd weathered together. Karma poured 2 bowls of steaming butter tea from the leather flask, handing one to me just as he had that very first night we met. I took a sip, the rich, familiar taste no longer strange to me, but woven into my life now, just like the man sitting beside me. "Remember when you called this tea awful the first time?" Karma asked, the corner of his mouth curving into a rare, warm smile. "I remember." I laughed, resting my head against his shoulder, gazing up at the same star-filled sky above the snow peaks. I never imagined back then that the man pouring my tea would become the one I'd want to spend the rest of my life with. Karma wrapped his arms around me, and we sat quietly together beneath the snow mountains. No longer the arrogant merchant and the cold, distant guide from that first meeting, but two souls who had found each other, chosen to stay and heal together among these vast peaks, bound to one another for the rest of their days. Perhaps what truly moves us isn't a declaration of love. It's when, in the middle of a frozen sea of snow, someone quietly hands you a warm bowl of tea, pulls you back from the edge of a fall, then slows their own pace just to wait for you to catch up. Wen Hao and Karma each carried their own prejudices, their own old wounds. But sometimes, healing comes from the very person we never expected to let into our lives. So tell me, what do you think makes someone slowly open their heart to another person? Is it being saved again and again? Or is it simply the feeling, at last, of having someone who truly cares?